Before the Rings of Power, there were the Silmarils. Before Sauron, there was his master Morgoth. Before Aragorn and Arwen, there was Beren and Luthien. Join us as we explore Tolkien and all the ages of Middle-earth with your hosts from theonering.com, Jonathan Watson, Michael Grumbine, and Dan Coates.
Hey everybody, as you can see or hear, there's no Michael or Dan with me today. I am all by myself. Schedules, the summer, I'll be going on vacation in a couple weeks. But today, instead of going through another story of Tolkien's or another essay like we did with On Fairy Stories, which is incredibly rewarding if you go to theonering.com/on-fairy-stories, I believe you can get all 6 episodes there and listen to that in succession. It's a really interesting discussion on what Tolkien meant by fairy stories and why they are important. So, yeah, listen to that. But you can see Michael and Dan aren't here. And in lieu of that, what we're doing is releasing some of those episodes, some of those interviews I had with the cast and crew of The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, back in 2003. I recorded these on an iPod with a microphone that was like third party, and so the audio isn't great, just like my voice isn't great right now as I'm a little bit under the weather, but there's a lot of static at times, and we repaired that as best we could, but it's really impossible to get it out without any sort of massive work in order to fix it. So we made it listenable, and there are a lot of interesting parts, particularly where Ian McKellen talks about the importance of the books. It's about the 15 to 18 minute point from the start of the recording, and how that was top of mind to them. And I think that's important as we look at how it isn't to other folks who are adapting Tolkien these days. Rings of Power. So yeah, take a listen. It's really interesting. In our extended podcast, we're going to go into some more details on this, on Ian McKellen, on his portrayal of Gandalf, on my thoughts on his portrayal of Gandalf. What is the little jade thing they talked about in the beginning of this episode too? I'll show you a picture of that. And we'll talk more about where we're going with the podcast over the next few months in particular. And so if you want to hear that extended edition, you can become a member at theonering.com/member. It's $4 a month. First month is free. You hear this every week if you're a regular listener. And why aren't you subscribed if you're a regular listener? Come on, it's $4 a month. It's like less than a freaking like medium tall whatever frappuccino at Starbucks these days, which is nuts to me. I can't believe how expensive coffee is. Can you? Like, I go there and I have to get a refill over and over and over again and bring it home, so that makes it worthwhile. Okay, never mind. Rant over. So anyway, become a member at theonering.com/member. You get the extended podcast, which is usually about 20 minutes longer, and you get access to our Discord channel. And all the folks there that are discussing Tolkien and the books and the films and the adaptations, and going through our book club that we're reading Taliesin by Stephen R. Lawhead, which is being made into a fantasy series by the Daily Wire. So that'll be something to look forward to coming up. And also, hey, because we're doing this also, reading through or listening to these interviews, which will probably have another 1 or 2, maybe 3, maybe coming out over the next month, is that we're going to be going through the complete list of film changes, which is something that one of our editors back in the early 2000s put together, named Anne Callaghan the Black. And we're going to need your help to update it. So what is the complete list of film changes? Well, let me show you. Back in the early 2000s, one of our editors, Anne Callaghan the Black, as he was named, he created the complete list of film changes, which is, if you go to film changes up here at the top, if you're watching this on YouTube or Rumble, you can see us there. We have general changes, Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, Return of the King. There are a lot of changes here, but it's not complete. Michael and I, and Dan at times, he won't be able to join us all the time, but we're going to be going through each one. We're going to be rating it. We're going to be talking about, is it lore friendly? Is it even necessary? And going through each change that we have. And so when we look at like the Fellowship of the Ring, for instance, this change here, there are quite, look at that scroll bar right there. There are quite a few changes here that we're going to go over. However, when you go to the Return of the King, it was later in the process, and we don't have quite as many. So we're going to need your help in order to update this complete list of film changes, make it complete. And if you want to hear us talk about your change, we'll call you out when we do it. But all you have to do is go to theonering.com/changes, or under film changes, you can click on submit a change. and you get to the page that tells you right here, go to the Fellowship of the Ring changes, Two Tower changes, Return of the King changes, and you can just go ahead and say, you missed this change. Here's what you need to add, right? And then you can just put it into there. You can view the entire list right here by going through what we have right now. So just go to theonery.com/changes and submit a change that we might have missed so that we can review it online in the podcast on YouTube. Every single one will be published. You'll have an exhaustive list of how Peter Jackson got the freaking thing wrong. No, I'm joking. I know everything can't be in there. And there are changes, believe it or not, that I actually like to the film that weren't in the book. So go to theonery.com/changes and submit them there. And we're going to jump into this interview with Ian McKellen. Again, sorry for the audio. I'll talk a little bit about at the end my thoughts about what he says about Peter Jackson and the books and him and the books, and how they do indeed perhaps go back to the books, back to the books, back to the books. Little inside joke there if you've been around for a long time with the Rings of Power. So here you go, the interview with Ian McKellen.
Andy had those on. Is it something from New Zealand?
It is. It's made of green stone, which is the local jade, really, but it's very, very hard. And thank you. The Maori used it to make weapons out of, but now they use it as a keepsake, and the tradition is that you don't buy it, but you're given it. And I was given this by a group of people I spoke to when I was there last time.
So is it a relief to be coming to the end of this 3-4 year thing? Mixed emotions?
I don't know that we're at the end of it. I mean, I put the last Gandalf grunt down the line from central London to New Zealand for the battle scenes in the last film, and I exhausted. Oh, is that it, Peter? Is that it? And he said, yes. We said, well, we put a few bits for the extended DVD, so I don't know that we've finished with it. And then there's always The Hobbit to come.
Are you hoping?
As Peter said last night to a BAFTA group, if it happens and he's not offered the job, he'd be a bit disappointed. And I think that's something since the principal photography, I've made 2 films, and I've been in a long run on Broadway and another one in the West End. I've had other jobs, so it hasn't been. It's not like it's been for Peter,
Right.
who finished work on Friday night and on Monday morning was storyboarding King Kong.
Right.
I have to ask you about something I asked Peter, about the Shire. They're being very symbolic of a place that we all want to get to, a place of peace and happiness. What is the Shire for you, Ian? Where is that place?
Oh, I see. Well, it's in your heart, but it's also it's home, isn't it? Home.
Home at a particular time in your life?
Well, it's a myth. It can be whatever you want it to be, but I wouldn't go beyond saying it's home. It's where you came from. And it's where you feel secure. And it's where you feel safe. I mean, life may be a bit complicated there, but I think the hobbits have sort of got it sorted out. They're the comfortable side of human nature. And I think probably it helps them, the idea of home and the idea of hobbitry and the idea of Hobbiton perhaps explains the immense appeal of these stories. I'm not sure I'd want to live in the Hobbiton of Peter Jackson's imagination. I think there's far too much. No, I must be careful. There's a sort of Ruritania about it, which is certainly there in Tolkien, but I like the fact there are no churches in Hobbiton. Interesting, isn't it? If you were designing the ideal village, you put a church in it, but no, this is before Christianity. This is when people were not told what was right and wrong. They discovered it themselves. And of course that, in the people of the Shire, is very appealing. And the four hobbits who saved the world is a wonderful notion. And I think that explains why the story is so popular. That's what we would all like. to be the case, wouldn't it?
What is the one message that you would like the audiences to get? The one thing that will be the legacy of the Lord of the Rings movies?
I wouldn't presume to tell an audience what to think ever in anything I do. I'm not a politician, I'm not a proselytizer, I'm not a pamphleteer, I'm an actor. And I work on behalf of people who do the writing and have the message. My job is not to tell the audience anything, it's just to explain the person I'm playing, beyond the side of the character I'm playing, good or bad. I don't judge characters. When I played Richard III, I didn't say I'm going to tell the audience why they shouldn't like tyranny and dictators. I just got on with explaining why Richard III turned out to be the way he was. And the same with Gandalf. I just do my best to impersonate it, but I can't anticipate the audience's reaction.
Can you describe how was to shoot those battle scenes? I mean, one thing is what we see in the film with all the CGI, and I guess something different was being in that day, filming those battles.
Well, it was a little bit confusing, and I've only been absolutely clear what those battles were about when I actually saw them on the screen. Although Peter was very specific about the details of what was going on. Sometimes, when I'm standing on a balcony overlooking the destruction of Mount Doom or something, I'm looking at nothing, and Peter's explaining to me, and I off camera, and I used to get a little bit lost, actually. And I realized, having seen the film just 2 nights ago, that I did a lot of the fighting in the third film very, very early on in my time on the shoot. I'd forgotten that. When we were on the dreadful volcanic fields around Mount Ruapehu. I did other parts of that battle quite recently, in the set of Minas Tirith, in an old quarry just outside Wellington. So, confusing, really. And you're very much in those situations, even as Gandalf is, the commander-in-chief. The real commander is Peter Jackson, and you just know at the end of the day with Peter, if he says that's excellent, then he's got what he wants, and you trust him. So the fighting side is much less interesting for me than the detailed stuff and the conversations and the eyeballing with the other characters and all that side of the acting.
Did you realize when you made these most recent choices over the last few years of the films that you would do? I mean, what realization did you have that you were suddenly become a gigantic icon for a younger generation?
People kept telling me your life's going to change, and I didn't really know what they meant. They were referring to Magneto as well in X-Men 2, which was a huge following. I'm probably a rather different demographic. I'm a younger, more steadfastly youth audience for that. But Lord of the Rings goes right up and down the generations. Well, I didn't sit down at home and say to myself, no, I want to play an iconic figure of the 20th century. And when 2 of them turned up, cheek by jowl, it was just chance. But I was unfamiliar with both. I didn't know X-Men and I didn't know Lord of the Rings, so I didn't really know what I was getting involved with. But it didn't take long to find out, and it was mainly through my website when I began to get big correspondence from people who really knew these things. And I was able to say to some of them, I remember some lad wrote in about X-Men. I said, well, would you do me a favour? Would you write the history of Magneto down for me? Because I don't think I'm going to be able to read the last 35 years of comic material. And he did. He sent me a long description of where Magneto had come from, all the contradictions in the various plottings that they've had over the years. And, and the same with Lord of the Rings. People who knew the books backwards and read them every summer, all waiting that see that we did things well and right according to their lights. And it could very easily have happened, of course, that the movies hadn't been approved of, and we wouldn't be here talking like this now. But so it's all chance, isn't it? It's all luck, being in the right place at the right time. And I very nearly didn't do Lord of the Rings because X-Men overran and I couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow the dates were pulled and tidged. I can remember the day when X-Men was going to overrun, and I called up Peter Jackson. I had a particularly sad heart and said, "Oh, sorry, I can't do Gandalf after all. I got to do an extra month on Magneto." And it was just a chance that night of being in the same restaurant as Bob Shea, who runs New Line Cinema, who said, "I'm glad you're doing the movie." And I said, "Well, no, I'm not. That's from this afternoon. I'm not doing it." "What's the problem?" "Well, I'm working for Fox." "Oh, leave it to me."
So,
Like these moguls say, and I did leave it to him, and lo and behold, a lot of people helped with that. Brian Singer, who was directing X-Men, big fan of the books, said, "Ian, you've got to play Gandalf." A lot of people knew better than I did, but what I was getting involved in is the point I'm making, I suppose. And so Brian guaranteed that I would be finished on time, and I'm very grateful. He's going to come to the premiere tonight.
Was there any apprehension in you playing Gandalf? I know Andy said there was some. Johnny Stavey said that there was a lot of. He just didn't want to get involved in something that was quite as long as The Lord of the Rings, and neither of them seemed to have at the beginning a complete appreciation for how much. I don't know. Love there is for.
Well, I mean, one of the reasons I wasn't unhappy to tell Peter I wasn't coming to New Zealand was that I wasn't sure about living away from home in a country I didn't know for a year. But there's nothing new to me about taking on a job that's going to last a year. I've signed contracts for 2 years. Stratford-on-Avon or National Theatre or something. I've been in long runs. I did Salieri on Broadway and Amadeus for 12 months without thinking about it. Jobs sometimes last that long, so that wasn't a worry to me. It was just being away from friends and so on. But they very sweetly gave us some tickets, so actually I had friends staying with me the whole time I was running a bed and breakfast. And if you've not been to New Zealand, you have to go, because it's very, very special. Blessed place.
Because your character is the one that everyone turns to. You are the wise man. You are the sage. Was it like that on the set? Did everyone? What was it like?
No. I think would be the answer to that. No, the wise man is Jackson. I mean, every morning you would arrive on set, didn't matter how early you got there, you got down in costume, and Peter would be sitting down in his chair. There's video monitors that he watched the proceedings on, reading a book. It was always the same book, Lord of the Rings, always. But I could match him because I had a pocket in Gandalf the Grey's costume that I kept my Lord of the Rings in, and so the night before I'd look up the scene we were going to do and see was there anything in the Tolkien that I thought had been missed or overlooked or could enhance what we got. And if you could point to the particular line and say, could we not have this back in the script, and it was written by Tolkien, Peter almost always said, of course. But he was the authority, and it's his movie. It's his vision of Tolkien. Every basic decision passed across his desk. But he ain't a tyrant, and he like all good directors, he casts well. I don't just mean the actors, but heads of departments. So people he could totally rely on. No one was sacked during this movie. He picked the right person right along the line. And you cannot overestimate people.
What kind of
Total master.
directions that Peter Jackson basically played your character?
What sort of
Instructions?
instructions? The main argument that we would have, I mean, discussion and disagreement, what's the word? Different point of view, was that if the character was angry, let's say, Peter wanted you to be angry. Shouting. And I'd say, well, Peter, sometimes when people are angry, they turn very charming and smile. They get very quiet. They're seething inside. That's a lifetime of looking for the subtext from this act. You know, what is really going on? Peter, in this story, didn't want any doubts about what was going on. He wanted it up front. So, despite all the beautiful pastel shades of the tinting of the, and you know, every single frame has been specially coloured. Technology in this film. But he wanted the emotions to be primary colours. Didn't want any doubts what was going on. If you're angry, you're angry. If you're in love, you're in love. If you're worried, you're really worried. No, all right. So and what would happen is we would have this, not argument, but discussion. And if he didn't persuade me, or vice versa, then what would happen is I'd do it both ways, and he could pick which he wanted to use.
Did he often pick yours?
Well, I would have to go back and have a look and try and assess that. But I do trust his taste so much. I think he's got wonderful taste. That, you know, I'd happily say he made the right decisions. But I think sometimes there's subtlety in my performance, so maybe I did win out for this one.
Where's the tattoo?
The tattoo, I have it there. What number? What number? Yeah, with me.
Don't you guys have it?
Oh, 9. No. Well, there are 9 members of the fellowship.
Oh, okay.
But then Peter Jackson had one, and his is 10. In Elvish. Mine says Gucci upside down. I upside down. I don't know what the word for 9 in Elvish is.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you. Sure, yes.
Having been in all the rooms, this is the coldest. It is not
Oh, it's
freezing.
very comfortable.
No,
Oh, you're not. Oh.
Were you by the window, or was that... That's not how things work in these hotels, is it?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian.
You've seen the film, haven't you?
Oh, yeah.
That's nice.
Do you give it the thumbs up?
Oh, yeah.
It's breathtaking.
I think a lot of people will. There are moments you could hear people sniffling in the theater.
Yeah.
People just.
Good sign, isn't it?
I think it's a very appropriate finish.
It's the best one of the three.
You think so?
I think
Okay.
theatrically, yeah.
I think it holds up to the extended DVDs.
Yes. Have you been looking at those as well? Yes.
It does make you anticipate the extended interpretation.
Well, yeah, the Two Towers extended DVD is great. It is just
Well, a friend of mine, the director, said he thought it was much better than the original.
all the fair.
You know, after listening to this again, I realized that discussion that Ian McKellen and where he talks about how Peter Jackson would come in the morning and arrive on set, and he would be there reading the books, reading what Tolkien wrote about the scene that they were going to film during the day. And Ian McKellen would do the same thing the previous night. He would read what the next day they would be filming so that he could see if there was anything that had been missed or overlooked or even enhanced based on what the script that he already had. So he was fully engaged in what Tolkien wrote. And this desire to be near to the books would have probably helped my perspective on how much I disliked The Fellowship of the Ring when it first came out. But that there is a passion for Tolkien in Peter Jackson and in the actors that he hired. I mean, we see it here in what Ian McKellen said. We saw it in Viggo Mortensen carrying his sword around everywhere, right? The passion to be immersed in Middle-earth, in Tolkien's world. We saw it in Christopher Lee, obviously, who read famously had stated that he read The Lord of the Rings every year for like 40 years. I guess at the time it would have been 30 years, because he was the only cast member who actually met Tolkien. So there is the desire to recreate, to subcreate out of Tolkien's world and let the cracks of light of what Tolkien wrote shine through the films, because you can't fully recreate what we can create in our head from what Tolkien wrote, right? That's what we went through on Fairy Stories, is that it's impossible for a film to create a world as completely as your mind can when it's an author's words to your head. You are experiencing hills and mountains because you experience them based on your own life experiences. And so the world that you create in your head when you read The Lord of the Rings is different than the world that I create when I read The Lord of the Rings. But since we've seen it in the films, and it was so good, now it's not a true subcreation anymore. But I think this is a big, long discussion on Fairy Stories that I could get into over and over and over again. But I think there's a value to having something great on film that is Tolkien's world, because a lot of people, like I still appreciate that a lot of people got to experience Tolkien in a way that is closer to the books than I expected, despite some of my misgivings about some of the decisions they made. So that's my thoughts on Ian McKellen. I mean, I hope you enjoyed that. We're going to move into our extended podcast now. We're going to talk a little bit more about my thoughts on Ian McKellen playing Gandalf, on the state of Tolkien fandom with the Rings of Power right now, because it's kind of what brought me back in 2021 to the community of Tolkien fans again. Had kids for about a decade, and when I was at Knott's Berry Farm with 4 of them, 11, probably 10, 8, 6, and 4. We were there, my wife and I, and the 4 kids, and I got this text from Dan that prompted me to jump back in. So we'll talk about that a little bit. We can talk about, somebody had a question about the audio dramatizations for the Lord of the Rings and which ones I like and which ones I don't like. So we'll talk about that. And if you want that, you can go to thelearning.com/member, become a member, join us, see us in our Discord chats, have deep discussions about on Fairy Stories. And if we can we've been trying to nail it down to sort of one understandable sentence, and boy, is that hard. I tried it in the podcast and I think I kind of failed, but it's a little tough. It's a little tough to nail something down that is a long essay that's had many scholarly examinations done of it over the last 50 years. So give that a listen. Go to thelearning.com/member, become a member. And if you're so inclined, like Harrison, Adam, Lynn, or Chuck, who give a little bit more to support us a little bit more, you can do that too. First month is always free, so join us there. And since Michael's not here, I'm sorry. I still have to say it, guys. Goodbye, freeloaders.